What's up, Yap Squad? We are coming to you from the future because we
Ooh.
recorded these episodes prior to June, but it is now June, and you know what that means? It's the gay month. It's Pride Month,
Pride.
and because we are gay and we have many gay friends and maybe gay family, and we love our LGBTQ plus community, we have decided to create a fundraiser that is going to go all month long. And so Sawyer's going to tell you a little bit about that, and it's going to all culminate into a really fun event at the end of the month where we are going to be hosting, drumroll, a Star Wars spelling bee with some of your favorite Star Wars creators. So, Sawyer, please tell us more about this.
You got it. So, we are fundraising for Point of Pride, which is a wonderful organization that provides life-saving medical care to trans folks in the United States. It is a wonderful charity. You may have heard of it before. There have been a lot of TikTok fundraisers for this charity, and it's very near and dear to our hearts, and that's why we chose it. And last year we did a fundraiser. We called it a Galaxy of Pride. We raised $1,200 for the Trevor Project. This year we are raising hopefully $2,500. That is our goal. There are some really wonderful rewards if you donate even just $5. You're gonna get a really cool Yap Sesh sticker in the mail. We've got some higher tier prizes as well, so be sure to go to the link, check that fundraiser out, and be there or be square on June 26th. That is a Wednesday. We will be having a evening live event, the Star Wars Spelling Bee, raising money for this project, for this charity, and we will have so many amazing creators. You aren't even prepared for the roster. It's going to be so much fun, and I am so looking forward to it. So, yes, happy Pride, and
thank you for listening, and let's get right into our episode.
What's up, Yap Squad, and welcome to the first ever Brainrot Bonus episode. I'm Sawyer.
And I'm Brooke.
And we are your lovely hosts of the Yap Sesh podcast. And today we're talking about something that we both love, but I think Brooke loves more than anybody else on the entire planet.
You don't say. The Last of Us.
The Last of Us.
Yeah, so we're going to have these brain rot bonus episodes where we're going to be picking a topic that is a little bit more less broad than maybe some of our other episodes are going to be, and talk about it because we've got our hyper fixations, and
we cannot stop yapping.
We can't stop yapping about it, and I will never stop yapping about something like this. So we thought it would be a great first episode, bonus episode, words. It would be a great topic to start with. And I wore my new hat that I got when I was in New York this weekend because we love Daddy Pedro Pascal, our very own Joel Miller. But we are going to be talking about the video games primarily and also the show. So this will be your spoiler warning. I think we're gonna do some non-spoiler stuff first. So if you've never gotten into The Last of Us before and you're interested in hearing some of our non-spoilery thoughts, stick around. But then we will be getting into spoiler territory later. We'll start with our non-spoiler stuff. I wanted us to both talk a little bit about our history with The Last of Us, or our experience with playing the games and watching the series. So Sawyer, if you want to start first, because I know we have different experiences.
We do. I mean, I've been consciously aware of The Last of Us for a while, and I think I was made I wasn't interested in it necessarily, but I think it was a combination of I think the trailer for the show dropped for season 1, and you were talking about it, and I was like, ooh, okay, wait a second, this actually seems interesting. I am not the biggest zombie fan on the planet, but I do like when zombie stories venture closer into the world of science because I'm a scientist and then, I like things to be realistic even in sci-fi. So when I first heard about it, I looked it up and I was like, whoa, wait a second, this is totally different. And then I watched the show. It's still one of my favorite television shows of all time. Specifically, episode 3, in my opinion, is like the best episode of television that I have ever seen. Best love story in an hour that anyone has ever told. But then I finally got into gaming, and Brooke and a couple of other of my friends, you always hear when you start gaming, like, oh, it's not the same, you have to play the game. And I was like, but do I? I've watched playthroughs. I think I actually, no, I watched playthroughs before I watched the show, so I knew what I was getting into. But then I hadn't watched anything from part 2, so I finally said, okay, fine, we'll do it. And I played them back to back within a span of like a month, and I have a lot of thoughts. But I don't think I know how you got into Last of Us to start with. So what's that story?
Yeah. I feel like it's also something that I have been consciously aware of for a long time. Um, my but I took a long break from any kind of gaming. I played a lot of games when I was growing up, and then I kind of just fell off of gaming in high school and college. So it was really only in the last few years that I've picked it up again. And my brother has also always been a big gamer, and I can't remember how long ago it was. I think I was still living at home. We were both still at home, and we had the PlayStation in the living room, so he was playing The Last of Us, and I watched him play through a lot of it. The very first I won't talk about any spoilers yet, but the very first thing that I ever watched him play through was the scenes with Sam and Henry, and the scenes at the end of Sam and Henry, and I was like, "What is this crazy game?" Like, that was wild walking into that.
What an
Um,
introduction.
Quite an introduction. I was very intrigued, but I still didn't play it. And then once the show had been announced, I was like, "Okay, I really need to play this game because I was so fascinated with the story. I had a vague idea of what it was about, but not, I had never experienced it firsthand myself yet. So I played through it and I was like, wow, what have I been missing my whole life? And then I played it like 8 more times back to back to back to back, um, up until the show released, and I played part 2. It took me a really long time. I took a break, like, I kept replaying part 1, and I was like, "I know what's coming in part 2 because I had been spoiled ahead of time of most of the, like, big story beats, and so I was, like, pushing it off because I knew that it was going to hurt me emotionally, and then I finally played it, and then I've played since then, I've played both of them, like, 12 times. I love the games so much. They are so special and dear to me. I watched the show when it was releasing. I had like a watch party every Sunday with my friends.
Mm.
It was really fun to watch. My brother and his boyfriend came over every weekend, and I had 2 friends and my boyfriend were there. And it was really fun that my brother and I were the only 2 people that had played through the game. So it was really entertaining to watch everyone's reactions experiencing the story for the first time, while we would like just look at each other and be like, oh my god, like they don't know what's coming or they don't know what they're going to see next. And that was a really special experience. And then I finally got my boyfriend to play both of them, and I'm so because after the first season of the show, I was like, I cannot wait years to not talk about this with you because I need to talk about what is going to happen. And he was like, I don't want to be spoiled or whatever. And I was like, okay, but will you play the games? And he's like, I'm down. So he played the games. And the most beautiful thing about it, like major green flag, is that he understood part 2 and liked it. And like he went through all of the emotions that the game was trying to like get you to feel in like a positive way, and not in the like, I hated this because it made me feel things so it's terrible. And I was like, that's it, that's perfect, I love him. It's great. But yeah, it's my favorite thing ever. I started cosplaying Ellie and Abby. I did both of them at New York Comic Con last year, and I have an entire Last of Us shelf of stuff, of the art book and statues, and I have another statue that's going to be here on Wednesday of a clicker, because a clicker is like my favorite monster ever. I think the concept is so cool. We'll talk about it a little bit later because they go into it more in the show than they did in the game. But like, I studied environmental science in college. That's what my degree is in. So the way that they were able to connect it back to like climate change and just how based in real science it all is just makes me so happy. That is like, oh, it's so good. But yeah, that's like my experience with it. I am not chill about The Last of Us.
Can confirm. Never,
Yes.
not chill is not the word I would describe. We went to Halloween Horror Nights together last year because the
Mhm.
main big house was The Last of Us,
Yes, we did.
and it was like if you ever like if you haven't hung out with like a neurodivergent person before, if they are like immersed in their special interest, they're not going to talk to you. Know if you were nervous, but you were just you were just there was just you could tell you were just like in heaven because it was, oh my god, The Last of Us. She was so immersed in what was going on and just everything that was The Last of Us themed that I literally had to like call out to her. She was rushing through the house and she almost missed the giant bloater, and I was like,
I
Brooke.
know. Well, the thing is, like, I was I was excited because I was like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to me." I was like stimming and like nervous, but I was also terrified because I hate haunted houses. I hate scary shit. I do not like horror movies. Like The Last of Us is like about the level of I love zombie stuff. I love apocalypse things. That is like about as the level of scary that I get. And I was like so nervous because I was like, they're gonna pop out at me and I'm gonna be really excited but really scared, and it
There
was a
were a
whole
lot of jump
thing.
scares. There were quite a few jump scares in that
There were
house.
a lot of jump scares. I'm not gonna lie, I loved going and I'm so glad I had the experience. But then I saw the Hollywood house, and that was a lot more of a theatrical experience because they had
Yeah.
more like Joel and Ellie. And I was like, damn, I didn't know they were different. I would not have been able to afford to go to
Mhm.
Hollywood anyway. So I'm like so happy that I got to go to Orlando and I had someone to go with me. So but anyway, it was really cool, and I hope they do something like that again. If they did something like that for like a part 2, it's over.
Yeah,
That would be
we
sick.
would be there absolutely, you know. And they did the theming was so amazing. You know, I have like personal beef with Universal, but you know, they had like whole ass like corridors that were decorated to look like you were in a Fedra zone, and like the I still have my can. I don't know if you have yours. I still have my
Oh,
Fedra
yeah.
can from the
Yes, I do.
ravioli.
It's on my shelf.
And like it was so. Oh, and then somebody gave you were in your Ellie cosplay, and someone gave you some. What did they? They
Yes,
gave
oh
you
my
a
gosh,
like
they
or
gave me a
something.
ration card.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
had, like, printed ration cards, and they had given me one because they saw my I was it was a loose Ellie cosplay. It was basically my cosplay without the brown wig because my hair was still blonde at the time. Now I, like, unintentionally have Ellie's hair color and haircut, so I can do it without the, and by unconsciously, there is some level of consciousness that's like, I sure, yes, this is exactly like Ellie. I just wanted to stop bleaching my hair though, honestly. But no, that was super cool. Um, and we got to see one of my favorite YouTubers there too. That was so random.
Oh yeah, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
no,
saw
they did a really great
Ordinary
job.
Adventures.
And we were only there for The Last of Us. I don't think we did any other houses. I think that's the only one we did.
We yeah, we wanted to do the Stranger Things house, but the line just never got any shorter.
One
And the
more
other
thing,
one,
yeah.
I feel like if I had done it again, I probably would have been like, okay, I need to suck it up because I spent money on this event. I need to go to more of the houses. But we did some of the rides, and I had never been to Universal before, so
Mhm.
I still got, a good experience out of it. And it is what it is. It was fun. It was good.
10 out of 10 would do it again. But yeah, anyways, so what else we need to oh yeah, like okay, so we know that we're Last of Us fans, but like what's our favorite elements of the games, the story, the characters? What
Yeah.
are your
So
favorites? If you can you realistically pick one favorite?
if I had to pick a favorite character, fuck. If I had
Okay,
to pick,
you can pick a favorite character from part 1 and part 2.
oh, it's so bad. It's so hard. So my whole thing is like, Ellie is the heart of The Last of Us. This is the story about Ellie. So without, we'll move into spoiler territory in a minute, but without getting into spoiler territory, even though you play as Joel in the first game, like the story is about Ellie. Like she is the heart and soul of this world, of the game. But Joel Miller is like one of my favorite fictional characters of all time for a multitude of reasons. I just love him so much. So I would have to pick probably Joel overall. Um, I love Ellie, but Ellie made me really mad in part 2 the first time I played through it. Like I had some beef, but that was the point, you know? That was the point to have that. And part 2, I have to say I love it's so hard to pick because I love everyone genuinely so dearly, like, and I love everyone's story. But if I had to pick, I would say I love Dina, but I think I love Lev. Lev in part 2 is probably my favorite character.
Mm. Yeah, and
What
that's
about
why
you?
we have this podcast, folks, because we really answer the same way to these questions. Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you. Joel is there is just something like yes, obviously he plays a very pivotal role in part 2, but there is first of all, just like gameplay wise, I think he's my favorite character to play as.
Mhm.
But also there's just because of the way that he is involved in part 2, it's just different, and I definitely felt his absence as like but honestly, like I don't know if that was like story wise or just like Ellie does not have the physical capabilities of Joel, so playing
It's a
as her
different
was
yes.
like,
It is a different and I really appreciate the different physicalities that all of the
mhm,
protagonists or the player characters that you get. I love I loved playing as Joel in the first
mhm,
game, but then when you switch to Ellie in part 2, it's such a you have to strategize so differently because she doesn't have the same physicality. She can't just, punch a zombie to death with her bare hands in the same way that Joel can. Now,
yeah,
I think that they supplemented that by giving us a player character like Abby who has a lot and
mhm,
I could do an entire Brainrot episode about how Joel and Abby are like mirrors of each other and people don't want to hear it but they are and that's intentional but like cuz she has a much more similar gameplay style
mhm,
when you play as Abby than when you play as Joel when you're
yeah,
comparing them. Um but okay, so we'll move into spoiler territory in a second, but I had another couple questions. Um what is your favorite weapon in the game
weapon.
or favorite
Um,
fighting style to use?
oh gosh, that honestly, well, first of all, you already, I just want to clarify that when I said that we had the same answers, I meant it. Like I would have both said Dina or Lev. But
Oh,
no,
yes, sorry.
yeah, no,
Got
no, no.
excited.
Yeah, yapping. But no, speaking of, uh, my favorite weapon is the bow and arrow. I don't like the crossbow. I do not think it gives the same effect. I think it's harder
Mm,
to use. It
mhm,
annoys me. When I was first playing it, one of the big contributing factors was A, the fact that my partner had the games, so I didn't have to buy them, and B, the fact that he absolutely Abby from part 2 is one of his favorite fictional characters of all time. And I remember texting Brooke when I first met my boyfriend, and I was like, I think this is a really green flag. And she was like, yes, keep it.
yes, it is. And then when I met
um,
him for the first time, I was dressed as Abby, so, you
yeah.
know.
And he still talks about it all the time. He's just like, gosh, I just really can't wait for Brooke to wear her Abby cosplay again. Yeah, I mean, all of Brooke's cosplays are amazing, but um yeah, so that being said, I am very like I'm very against anytime I play an RPG, I always take like the quiz at the beginning of the game and it tells me that I'm supposed to be like it gives me extra points for melee. I hate melee weapons. I don't use them. I
Uh-huh.
try to avoid them at all costs. I also hate machine guns. So like I am very much like your standard pistol kind of gal, but I was having such a hard time with part 1 and the clickers, and he was like, "Babe, you got to use the bow and arrow. You got to use the
Mhm.
bow and arrow." And I was not good at it at first, but eventually got really, really good at it. And there's something so satisfying about shooting it right in the center and it falls in the ground. It's just
Uh-huh.
they don't alert the other clickers in the area. It's definitely the bow and arrow.
I would I like the crossbow, actually. I do like the
Oh, okay.
crossbow. I am not so the first time I played the games, I was so scared, and I was playing as I was reading a walkthrough. I know you're not supposed to do that. I don't care. I don't like being jump scared, so I needed to know when there were jump scares. But I was so cautious because I didn't know where the enemies were, right? Like, so I played super safe and super stealthy when I could. But now going back, especially the first game, like I could tell you where all of the resources are that you can pick from, where all of the enemies are that you can get. And so I just like anyway, I started blasting. Like that's my strategy now. But I still really like, especially in part 2 when they introduce the silencer, is playing stealth but ranged. So I don't like it makes me
Mm-hmm.
nervous to like sneak up from on someone from
Yeah, me
behind and
too.
stab them or choke them. I will if I have to, but I much prefer to use like the silencer, the bow and arrow, the crossbow to get rid of as many enemies as I can before being like spotted and have to engage in like real combat. Um, I'm a button masher for life. So it is hard for me also playing RPGs to use like melee things because all I want to do is button mash and it's like no you have to be strategic about it and you have to know how to dodge at least in the second one they don't have dodging in the first game which
I
is
write
like
a quarter for every time my sibling or Billy has been like, "You need to dodge." When I run up on an enemy, like I'd be so rich.
oh yeah with every single game I play I yep that's how it happens. Um, okay, and my last question before we go into spoiler territory is do you prefer part 1 or part 2 more?
I think we actually differ on this. I think at least right now, I don't know if it's recency bias or just not that, like having time to simmer and let it sit. I think I prefer part 2. There's definitely elements that are harder to go through, like story wise, but there's just everything that made The Last of Us unique in the gaming world. Things like having to tap your flashlight and like just the realism behind it that was not really seen before, and they kind of set a standard for video games. uh they knocked it out of the park even further when part 2, and I think there's just something like it's not like a movie game, like there are games where it's basically just a movie that you press the occasional button. It's not like that, but in the same way but it is cinematic. It
Mhm.
is an experience. I think I felt more removed, like more of a player in the first game. And I feel like I'm actually moving with Ellie and Abby in the second
Mhm.
game. So when I do revisit them, I think I will start by replaying too.
Okay. No, it is very they are very cinematic games and I think part 2 does this especially well and I know that there are people who don't love the gameplay style of even with the improved mechanics in part 2. But what I love so much about it is that it is at least I feel it is intentionally clunky because it is supposed to be so based in what would really happen. You know, like
Hmm.
when I play Uncharted, realistically, I know that no one in the world could scale a building or jump from iceberg to iceberg or like icy cliffside to icy cliffside with their bare hands and like hold on to the mountainside. Like it's obviously there's a level of it being unrealistic because it's a video game, but then you go to something like The Last of Us and the way that you sprint and you slow down because you start to get tired, or the way that you have to maneuver around desks and other things, and how it's like clunky, and how it's like you get off balance because like that's what would happen in like as a real person. And I really appreciate that detail, is that it makes it a little bit more challenging, that you're not like this superhuman that can just magically work their way around a room, especially a dark room sometimes, and like make it out without slipping or tripping and falling. Like I love that
Mhm.
aspect of it. Um, but to answer the question, I prefer part 1 just because I love the simplicity of the story. I think I'm a firm believer that stories do not have to be super nuanced and super detailed or super crazy with all these twists and turns for it to be a good story. Like it is for the first one is formulaic. I think it does subvert some expectations and subvert some regular storytelling tropes in a really beautiful way. But it is a very simple plot with simple characters. And as beautiful as part 2 expands on that and adds so much nuance that I could literally like write a thesis on it. Um, I just love there's something about the, like, intimacy of the first game that just really gets me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like when I do intend to play both of them again. Like I miss playing as Joel, so I think that they will perhaps my opinion will change
I
as
will
it
say it
ages.
is very hard to go back and play part 1 after you play part 2 so many times, and you can't go prone and you can't dodge.
Oh
It
yeah.
is, like, a level of frustration that I'm like, "Shit, I forgot I can't do that with this," um, that you can do with part 2. But story-wise, I gotta go with 1. But,
Okay.
I think it's time to go into some spoiler territory. So we're still going to talk a little bit more about our favorites of the game, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the show and where this franchise is going forward, and then we have some listener questions that we want to respond to. So with spoilers now, let's talk about some of our favorite moments. It could be from part 1 or part 2 or the show.
Ooh. Well, I already said that, like in the show, that the episode 3 with Bill and Frank is definitely my absolute favorite love story of all time. I just think that the way that they expanded on it and changed it was so beautiful, and kind of the way that I probably was intended to be in the original like development of the story. And I just absolutely loved it. But overall, I mean, gosh, that's so tough. Um, is this a hot take? This is a hot take. It shouldn't be a hot take. I have I have I have a soft spot for the boat scene in part 2.
Really?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of controversy around it, and I think I at first was like, this is not appropriate. And then Mel was such a bitch to Abby on day 3 that I was like, you know what? First of all, people are so disgusting about the way they talk about Abby. Abby is an incredible character. Her development throughout the story is, like Brooke said, so much like Joel's own journey that he goes on in part 1. And big, strong girls are beautiful. So shut up. And also, that scene is so, looking back on it and looking back on what Owen really wanted for his life and like what was taken away from them and the pressures of, you know, trying to figure out where they belong because they don't really belong. I don't think Owen ever really belonged with the Wolves. But like looking back, I have to have a soft spot for it because there's like this shred of like, oh my gosh, wait, they could find that, you know, spark and that happiness that they had
Mhm.
together if they went away to go try to find these fireflies. Like, oh man, there's like a longing. So when I say I have a soft spot, like obviously, yes, there's some moral questions there, but there's moral questions with every character in this series. And
Right. That's the kind of like the whole point, is
the
that
whole
it's
point,
not black
right?
and white. To me
Exactly.
that to me the boat scene is really sad,
Hmm.
just how vulnerable both of the characters are and what they're going through. I think a lot of there are a lot of haters that don't like it because of Abby not being your, standard conventional beauty that we normally see. But there's also a lot of like Abby stans that hate Owen. And sure, Owen is not the greatest guy. He does some shitty stuff. But like to me, it's just really sad because he has also experienced a lot. He's been with Abby through all of it, and he's been with her from their transition from the Fireflies to the Wolves. I agree. I don't think that he ever really belonged with the Wolves. That was just I don't really don't think Abby ever belonged with them either. That was just like this is the safety that we found in this situation that we're in, and this is what we have to deal with. And I don't hate Mel. I don't like how she treats Abby. I think everyone in this game deserves better on some level,
That's true, yeah.
but I also think like it just sucks for everyone. And I feel like Mel was not understanding enough and was also very hypocritical because she is like their healer or their doctor, and she
Mhm.
still like was on the side of no, I think Joel deserved worse than what he got. And it's like, well, what
Yeah.
side are you on? Because now she like resents Abby for what happened, even though she says, with her words that she agrees with what happened. And
Mhm.
it's a whole thing. And like if you think about it, if you watch it back, Owen is the reason that they didn't kill Ellie. Like
Mhm.
he's what stopped them from just discarding all of them and saving Tommy too. So, you can't look at it in a vacuum. You got to look at it these
Yeah.
characters from all sides. But
Mhm.
other favorite,
Actually, while we were talking about this, something else that came to mind, just gameplay wise, um, I I wouldn't say I'm a completionist, but I do like to pick up lore and pick up artifacts and stuff when I'm playing games. And I think one of my favorite sequences is the sewers in part one. First of all, I thought it would be a lot worse than it was. It was not. It was a lot shorter playing it than like
mhm,
watching a playthrough. But that whole sequence, learning the story of the families that were living in the sewers, the
mhm.
classroom, all the Easter eggs, and I mean, just the world building in these games, like, is so incredible. But I think I have that is so sad. It's so sad, but it it is just a testament to the world that Neil Druckmann created and the attention to detail and really just every single character, even the ones we don't ever see, are so fleshed out, and I think that is a perfect example of it. So that is another favorite of mine, I think.
It feels like such a lived in world because of all of these notes and things that we see, and even just the level of detail that they've put into the environments that you go through. And that was something I also really appreciated about the show, that it really got the tone of the the world right, and that was so important. Um, but yeah, no, something that hit me so hard was when we you go through the sewers, there's a section where you can find like a kid's classroom, and you see on the ground in you read a note, and the note says like, if it gets bad, I'll make sure that I'll do what has to be done. And
Yeah.
then on the ground, like written in chalk, it says they didn't suffer. And then you see like these children covered with like a tarp, that whatever adult was in there with them, because the place got overrun by infected. Like it hit me so hard. I'm like, this is crazy. Like this is the world that they live in. Um, it is very it makes me so sad, but I'm also just like, oh, it's so good. The same
Yeah, no,
time.
it's so good. I mean, there's something to be said about the fact that even though you're already well accustomed to the world after you've played one, then you go into the second one and you think you have seen everything there is to see about this sad post-apocalyptic fungal universe, and then every single note just hits you like in part two the same way that it does with part one. And like they've thought of every sad outcome for the world that you could possibly imagine. It really sucks, but at the same time, it's like tragically beautiful, you know. It makes it feel like a, you know, there are other games and universes, like Fallout comes to mind because I'm playing through my first Fallout game right now, and like, yeah, there's amazing lore in Fallout, but there's something so intimate about The Last of Us, and that it's as though they genuinely cared about every single fake human that lived in this world, and that just makes it so special and unlike any other gaming experience I've had personally.
Most of my favorite moments, I think, come from interactions between Joel and Ellie, but I also
Yeah.
I love just all of the, and I love this about the show. I love this so much about the show. All of the, and this is why when I tell people, um, like, I'm not gatekeeping, but like genuinely, when you, if you're going to play the game, like play it and play it all the way through. Don't just watch the cutscenes. Or if you're gonna watch a playthrough, like if you're gonna watch the story, don't just watch the cutscenes, because so many character beats happen, or good character moments happen throughout the gameplay. And Naughty Dog is so good about adding these beautiful moments of dialogue while you're just going through the environment, even if nothing crazy is happening. You're not engaging in any combat, you're not, scaling the side of a building. It's just these small moments that are so good. Like one of my favorites in part one is when they go into the hotel in Pittsburgh and they're in the little lobby, and they put this in the show too, where Ellie like goes up to the front, like where the bellhop would be, and she's like, "Oh yes, like I would like one room, blah blah blah." Like it's so cute, and it's such, they make Ellie such a, they make her feel like a teenager. Like she is this
Yeah.
girl that is it comes from this terrible world, but at the same time is sheltered only to the point that she has not experienced the old world. So there's all these things that she's read about but has not ever experienced. So seeing all of
Hmm.
it for the first time, like one of the first things she says is, "Holy shit, I'm actually outside." Um, there's so many of those little moments. I still want a tattoo that says, there's a moment where Ellie asks Joel if he ever used to go to coffee shops, and he's like, "Yes, all the time." And she said, "Well, what would you order?" And he says, "Coffee, just coffee." And I so desperately want, and I'm a huge coffee person. I drink coffee all the time. Um, I want a tattoo with a coffee cup that just says, just dot 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 just coffee, just like the line. And it's one of my favorite moments. I would say one of my other favorites in part one is after Ellie runs away and they have their big blowout argument. There's this moment where they're going back to Jackson, and at that point, Joel has already made up his mind. Despite what he said to Ellie, he did not actually mean those things, and is like, "No, I'm going to continue on with this because I did not realize how much this girl cared about me." And in it wasn't until then that I didn't realize how much I cared about her. And I love that their relationship has never been, super fuzzy, super like lovey dovey. It feels very realistic to me because that's how a lot of relationships are, especially
Hmm.
between parents and children. As much as we want, to have that super loving relationship with our parents, not everyone has that. And sometimes it shows to me like how close they are, that they don't need those things. They don't even need the right words to understand each other.
Hmm.
Um, because Joel is like, "All right, get on the horse, we're gonna go." And then he just looks back and he said, "You good?" And Ellie goes, "Yeah, I'm good." And like that is all they need. I love that they did something similar in the show in the finale. Um, when Ellie says something, they're talking about Sarah, and Ellie says, like, "Well, I'm glad that you've had the time to, come to terms with, or, to heal from Sarah's death." And he tells her it wasn't time that did it, and they just give each other a look, and Ellie says something like, "Oh." And she says, I can't remember what she says else, but I'm like, that is the closest that we will ever get to them telling each other, I love you. And that's
Yeah.
I don't need them to explicitly tell each other that they love each other. That's like all I need. And I think those moments are so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the ending of part 2, oof, man, and I totally, agree with you. I've got beef with Ellie. I am not happy with the way things ended in that game, and I have a hard time, as beautiful as the ending is, it's just like, ugh, like, man, that's like a whole other episode, but I think what's so crazy is that the show does evolve what we see in the game and allows for us to kind of expand on the world and expand on some of the side characters and stuff, but the show in so many ways, even with just like Joel moving the shelf and like stuff, like it is so one to one with the game at points that when I played the game for the first time, I was like, wait, aren't I missing a dialogue option? And Billy was like, yeah, you're missing a dialogue option. Like he's supposed to like when they're almost about to get to the fireflies, and I'm like, doesn't he say that he like gave himself his own like in a wound, like in self-inflicted gun wound? That's not in the game. That is from the show.
Yep. Yeah, there's some such beautiful creative choices that they made. And what I love about the show too is that because the games exist, they can now pull more from part 2 to foreshadow what is going to happen in season 2. And not even just cuz we actually got to see Jackson in the show, and we got to see what becomes Ellie's horse, which is cool. But even just like little moments that are like, oh, this is foreshadowing for later. Like my biggest headcanon in the games is that Ellie's denim shirt that she wears in Seattle is a shirt that belonged to Joel. And then all
Mm,
through like the entire season almost, Joel is wearing, I mean, he is wearing a similar denim shirt in the game, which is why I think that. But like, I feel like somehow they made it more explicit, like, this is a denim shirt that Joel is wearing, and Ellie's gonna wear it later, and if that's turns out to be true, I will need 4 to 5 business days to process that.
it's
Um,
gonna hurt so bad. Oh my god.
yeah.
Um, but I mean that begs the question: what is season 2 gonna look like? What do you think? Because there's a lot of speculation, and nobody has made any kind of like confirmation. And we got a couple of people asking us in on our Twitter and on Instagram, like what we think is gonna happen in season 2. So I this is a good place to talk about that because like
Yes,
I think we have different opinions a little bit.
I think so. Um, okay, it's so hard that I think about this literally all the time, and I've like talked it out numerous occasions with different people, and I feel like I change my mind every time about what we're gonna see. I think we know that season 2 is not going to be the entire game. They've
Hmm.
they're splitting it into multiple seasons because I think there is enough material that it would be hard unless you did like a 12 to 15 episode season to do the entire game. We know that it's only going to be 7 episodes. I
Oh, I
think
didn't know that.
so the first season was 9 episodes. It was supposed to be
Mhm.
10, but they put the first 2 episodes into one. So the first
Mhm.
episode was originally supposed to be episode 1 and 2. If you haven't listened to the Last of Us HBO official like companion podcast, I highly suggest it because they have Craig and Neil on it, and Troy Baker, who plays Joel in the games, is the host, and so they all have a lot of really good insight. But they said that when originally the first episode was supposed to end on 20 years later, when you see Joel working and he throws the body of the child into the fire, and that was the episode. And that is like pre him and Ellie meeting. And I feel like they
Mhm.
went back and they were like, this can't, no. Like, we have to
Yeah,
have them at least meet each other and like start their adventure, which is why we got such a long first episode. So I am going to say that is what they're going to do for season 2. And because of that, Joel is going to die in the first episode. And that is just, people keep going back and forth. Oh, do you think they're gonna push it and they're not gonna kill him off until later in the season? No, they're gonna do it in the first one because to me that is the catalyst that sets off the entire series, like the entire story of part 2. And unless they wanted to go more chronological where they have the flashback scenes in the beginning and then do that, but I just think for the tone and the storytelling aspect of it, the flashbacks work really well as flashbacks. I can't say the same for every thing that has flashbacks that I've seen, because there are many movies and shows that I've seen that overuse these flashbacks and that aren't really applicable to like what's happening in the present. But to me, they do it wonderfully in part two. So I think we're going to get like I think we're gonna get the death. I think we're gonna get like the very first section, like lead up to his death and the little bit of the aftermath. To me, that is like a beautiful intro to the story. And I think that would be a beautiful first episode, because you have the mystery of who is Abby? Who is this girl? Why the fuck does she have beef with Joel Miller of all people? Like, we've never seen her before. We have the mystery of what happened at the dance the night before. Why was uh like what happened between Dina and Ellie, and what is their dynamic like? They're introducing
Mhm.
new characters. I think we see enough of Dina's personality, Jesse's personality. I think we see a lot of the world building of what Jackson looks like and what
Yeah.
has been happening in the world since we last left Joel and Ellie.
Mhm.
I think it does like a beautiful job of that. I think we see the little bit of aftermath that we get like immediately following, where they find Ellie, they find Joel, and then you have the conversation where Joel or Tommy has been Tommy and Ellie have been working together to try to figure out where these people came from, how they can get to them, and then ultimately deciding to leave to go to Seattle. Like that for me would be a perfect first like long episode.
Mhm.
I don't know where they're going to leave the season off though, because
Yeah.
the way that the game is, if you haven't played the games, you play from Ellie's perspective for about, I would say, up to the halfway point of the game,
Mhm.
and then the back half of the game, I would say for like most of it, you play as Abby, and you
Yeah.
get her story. So the game follows 3 days in Seattle from Ellie's perspective first, and then we go back in time, and then we see what Abby has been up to during those same 3 days. And then
Mhm.
there is like the third act, I would say, of the story where we get the aftermath of Seattle and like the wrap up where there's like a little bit of a time skip. Um, like I think a perfect second season would be all of the Ellie stuff and ending off on the theater showdown between Abby
Mm.
and Ellie. But I don't know what they would do with season 3, because we would get significantly less Ellie and it would be mostly
Yeah.
Abby. And from like a marketing perspective, because of how divisive the game was and how
Mhm.
divisive it still is with how people feel about Abby, I'm like, I don't I don't know if they're gonna have to do some, like, perspective switching, but they also have the
Yeah.
ability to what we saw them add, we are not constrained by the narrative of only having the player's perspective. So, like, the first game, we only got Joel's perspective of what was happening,
Mhm.
and then we only got Ellie and Abby's, but they can expand on that because they're not doing that same first person POV in the show.
Yeah, and that's something that the show does so well is giving like extra screen time to these other characters who have less time in the games but are just as important to the overall narrative. So I don't want to agree with you, but I think I do just because I think also we know that Pedro has like been on and off filming, so that means that that to me sounds like they are intending to shoot things with flashbacks.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll get more flashbacks than we have in the game, but that's just me
Yeah.
selfishly wanting more Joel time. But
Yes.
yeah, I don't know. I agree. I don't think it's going to be like Ellie one season and then Abby the next because I think that just for people who are not familiar with the game, I know my parents loved season 1. They have absolutely no idea what they're in for season 2, and
Mhm.
they don't want spoilers. And I honestly don't know if they'd even watch it if I was like, oh yeah, by the way, like Joel's dead. Um,
Yeah.
but so I think it would be difficult to introduce Abby, have her brutally murder Joel, and then be like, next time you're only gonna have her to follow this, so but that being said, I mean, they they could have, you know, they could spend an equal amount of time on Abby. I think we'll have more of her interaction with all of her friends on their way to Jackson. And I think we'll also, they could even do an episode in the middle of the season where they're headed back to Seattle from having completed their mission.
Mhm.
So, but I'm so bad at speculating, and especially with this team of creatives, like I know that whatever they're going to come up with, it's going to be better than anything I could possibly have imagined.
Yes.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think we will see Joel die in the first episode of season 2.
I just can't think of a way out of it that makes sense narratively and
Yeah.
has the same impact. Like at first I was like, "Oh, is this going to be like Glenn from The Walking Dead all over again where a lot of people stop watching?" And I'm like, I desperately hope that doesn't happen because in a different way, like we see in The Walking Dead, Negan kills Glenn and then we never see Glenn again. There isn't the opportunity for flashbacks in the same way that
Mhm.
there are in part 2. And I'm like, no, please keep watching because my favorite moment in the entire game is Ellie's birthday. And it
Yeah,
makes me sob every
yeah, me
time. And like,
too. Yeah.
I think Nick on Twitter, N.A. Schmid on Twitter asked if there are any highlights that we were looking forward to in the show. That moment is like something I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of the fun moments. I don't know if we'll get this in season 2 or season 3, but one of my favorite moments I forgot to talk about is when Abby and Lev are going over the bridge, the big like sky bridge,
Mhm.
and Abby is deathly afraid of heights, a big part of her character. And Lev just goes, "So, what's going on with you and your friend Owen?" And she's just like, "Oh my God, Lev, now?" And he's like, "Seemed really awkward." I love their relationship too, and I hope that they flesh out more of that. I think they're going to flesh out more of the world building of the Seraphites,
Mhm.
and when we get to the Rattlers, and I hope we get to see things from Tommy's perspective because his
Oh
story
yeah,
intrigues
yeah. Oh,
me.
duh. Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his story intrigues me so much, and I think that um Gabriel Luna is going to do amazing because he has already
Yes.
been so amazing as Tommy, and I can't wait.
Yes. Or give us also a DLC of that. Like, I would love to do, like, I would love a Last of Us Part 2 DLC where we get to play as Tommy, because he goes on a rampage.
Yes.
And like I remember, like, because Billy obviously played the game when it first came out, and so he was like, "Oh, you'll see how so and so dies," and I was like, "Oh gosh, that has to mean that, like, it was a Seraphite or something." I totally forgot about Tommy, and I was like,
Yes.
okay.
That's probably my favorite song on the soundtrack too, is "Eye for an Eye,"
Mm,
is the song that plays while you're having their shootout with Tommy that we
uh,
don't know it's Tommy yet, and it's amazing. Um, but to wrap things up, speaking of, a DLC, they did tease. So if you watched the making of The Last of Us Part 2 that was recently released, there was like lost footage
mhm.
from COVID that they stopped doing it while they were working on the game, and then they picked it back up and they interviewed Neil and Ashley and Troy and a bunch of people. Anyway, at the very end, Neil Druckmann says that he thinks there is still one more part of this story to tell, which means nothing official has been announced, but I would assume that there would be a Last of Us Part 3 in our distant future. Is there anything in particular that you would like to see? I know you said that you're not great at speculating. I'm also not great at speculating. Anything that we come up with is probably not going to be as good as what they come up with, but like if there was anything you wanted to see, what would you want to see in a part 3?
Yeah, I mean, Honestly, I honestly would like the game to start with Abby and Lev. I want to know that they're okay. I want to know that they are hopefully not being driven by the same motivations as Ellie, because I think Abby has grown up a lot, and I think Abby was not expecting things to end that way, and I wasn't expecting things to end. I knew things weren't going to end well, but I did have a shred of hope there when Ellie got there and untied them. I was like, okay, they're gonna have some kind of truce, but inherently based on Ellie's actions, I knew that wasn't gonna happen. So I hope they find the Fireflies, and I hope the game starts with them. Um, I also honestly like maybe I'm just mad at Ellie, but I want to know that Dina's okay. I want to know that JJ's okay. I want to know that everybody is okay. And if Ellie needs to go sit in a quiet corner and like deal with her actions for a little bit, and then we don't see her for half the game, I would be okay with that.
Mhm.
But as for where her story fits into the game, I'm not sure.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so hard to think. Like I've always been in the camp that I think a part 3 would be more interesting if we play as Abby or if we
Hmm.
get more from Abby. I think there's a place for Ellie. Really and this kind of my idea was sparked after watching the Walking Dead Dead City spinoff with Maggie and
Mm.
Negan.
Oh yeah,
Is I would love to see because and I not in any type of enemies to lovers way because that is not what I want out of Negan and Maggie, and definitely not what I would want out of Ellie and Abby. I know there are some Ellie Abby shippers out there, and I respect you, but I just can't get behind it.
yeah. Mm-mm.
But in the way that I would love to see them be forced into a situation where they have to work together. The only way that I can see that happening is if Abby and Lev found the Fireflies on Catalina Island, which the end loading screen in part 2, once you finish the game and it goes back to the main loading screen, it shows Catalina Island. So that is my
Mm.
confirmation that they were able to reach the island and find the Fireflies. I would love to see the Fireflies start to rebuild. As much as I'm like mostly anti Firefly, especially in part 1, I think it's not an inherently bad organization. It was just not run well at the time, and that's a whole other conversation. We could have probably a whole episode about the
Yeah, we
science of
may
The
have to
Last
do
of
this
Us.
again because
Yeah.
sure, definitely. Um,
Um, but
yeah,
I would
I
love
mean,
to see them if there was someone still working on a cure, that's the only way that I could see
mm,
Ellie's story fitting back into it, because we know
fair.
Abby knows that she's immune, the only immune
Mhm.
person that they've ever met. I think that's hopefully the only reason that Ellie would ever leave again and, like, leave her life behind in the
Yeah.
not in the way of revenge, but in the way of, like, the hope of maybe being able to do what she
Mhm.
set out to do from the beginning. I just spilled my drink everywhere. It's mostly empty. That's my idea, but, like, whatever it is, as long as it's set in the Last of Us universe, I will be happy.
Yeah, I would play any spin-off. I would do any of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you'll convince me to play Uncharted at some point, but I think it's so different that I need a little convincing. Um, okay, I think that wraps everything up. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first brain rot bonus episode. This was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do these again because it's just fun to sit and talk about the things we love.
Yeah, this was a great time. If there are any other topics that you'd like us to talk about, you can let us know on any of our socials, Yap Sesh Pod on Instagram and Twitter or X, and then yap.sesh.podcast on TikTok. But yeah, until next time, yap on, yappers.